hum the theme song. Won't hold it against you if you get parts wrong. While the memory's not too strong, there's a piece of you from a time long gone. So while these fuzzy warm feelings remain, question we ask is still the same. Is it a treasure or just plain lame? Is this still good?
Hello and welcome back to Is This Still Good, a podcast about digging up childhood treasures and opening those time capsules, seeing if they have any resale value on the open market, and occasionally a desperate plea for relevance by tying into something that's releasing new. Gavin, how you doing?
Good. You know,
That
dusting
voice
off
is
things.
that voice is Gavin. I'm Sage. Usually we introduce earlier. Sometimes we do it 20 minutes later. You're always in for a surprise.
Consistency is key.
Gavin, what would your reaction be if I told you that they're making an HBO series of the 2003 film City of God?
It would be, huh?
That is fair. That's what we're talking about today. 2003 coming-of-age story set in the crimey slums of Rio de Janeiro, Cidade de Deus. I'm going to be mispronouncing a lot of Portuguese words and Portuguese names and maybe some Spanish names in this episode. Para todos os meus brasileiros, isso é para você. So now that we got that out of the way, we have a guest with us today. Our guest is Yvan Iturriaga. How did I do on the name?
That was close.
Yeah, I went for close.
Yvan Iturriaga.
Ooh.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I always put an extra U in there. I think the instant I see the first U, I add a second one.
Once you see double R's, G's, and all the, Basque names are just complicated like that.
Yeah, you have 3 double letters in your name. Repeating letters. That is, I bet your life's a little hard. It's a Basque name?
Yeah, it's a Basque name. School is cool. Every time a teacher just kind of stumbled right in E, I knew I just raised my hand. I was like, it's me. No need to try.
So Yvonne's on here because he's a Chilean-American filmmaker, and I figured he might have a little bit of insight. And also, this movie's important to a lot of us. Mm-hmm. You said that, what is your connection to City of God? Where were you when you first saw it?
Well, I graduated college 2003, so I saw it right around that time. I don't remember if it's before or after graduation, but it was kind of refreshing in a lot of ways because this movie did a lot of things that people were telling you not to do that I actually really liked. So I went to a program, film school, read all these books, and everybody, was always skeptical of flashbacks, VO, all these different techniques. They're like, they're corny, overused, whatever. And then you see this movie and it just does it masterfully and just made me love it. And also it blew up in Latin America. It blew up in Brazil. It was huge. It was the first time kind of showing the reality of this place. Before that, you just had telenovelas showing Brazil. That's what we grew up with in Chile. A lot of Brazilian telenovelas where everybody mostly looks the whiter side of Brazil, the more upper class side of Brazil. And this movie just felt super authentic, and it was. 90% of the actors are folks that lived in this neighborhood, so who had never acted before. So it was super impactful for me.
Did it actually have some influence on pushing you into film, or were you always kind of going that way?
No, I was already in it, but it definitely validated this sense of how to tell stories, and how to lean on real folks. A lot of projects I've done is a lot of actors that, are either up and coming or never acted before. And I think that has a value, and it's cool to work with in that way.
The success of this movie also shows that there is a market for these type of stories and that it can blow up, and that was inspiring to me on my journey towards film. This is the first, I'm a little bit younger than you. I think I saw this movie freshman year of high school, maybe a little bit later. But I'd really never been exposed to this. I guess this type of story is I have because there's a lot of escaping poverty films, and there's a lot of stylistically similar films in like the late '90s. This is almost like a Guy Ritchie movie at times. um, but I'd had no real exposure to, big movies from Latin America or Africa or Southeast Asia. They exist and some of them have been popular, but I hadn't seen anything. And I'm going to let this garbage truck pass through my alley for a second.
You're in a favela right now?
I'm in Koreatown, so it depends who you ask.
Word. Yeah, that's a good point. It definitely, people talk about representation, whether, I'm not Brazilian, but having a foreign language film make it get 4 Oscar nominations,
Yeah, they
so
did
like
okay.
they did all right, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but did not get nominated for Best International Feature.
It was weird, right?
Yeah, those 4 Oscars are
Do you
for
know-
writing, directing, cinematography, and editing.
Do you know what
Yeah.
beat it out in terms
Yeah,
of that category? I'm very curious.
Was it
This
Life is
is-
Beautiful around there?
Well, that was the year Return of the King won most things.
Yeah, they stole.
I mean,
But best foreign film, what was the
So it'd be Evil, Twilight Samurai, Twin Sisters, and Zellery.
movies we've never seen?
Yeah, these
I've
all had
only seen
big
Barbarian
lasting-
Invasions because they showed it in film school, and it was very slow. It's actually
it
just
in
takes place at a
French?
dinner. It's yes, it's in French. It's
Okay.
a Quebecois film. Yeah, no, it's wild. You will have these international films that make a huge splash, and they just, for whatever reason, sometimes political, does not get nominated for Best International Foreign Film.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Um,
funny when sometimes the country doesn't even put them forward and they
Yeah.
wind up. But this one was
I mean,
put
you only get
forward.
one, which I can't imagine. Like, this was put forward and just not,
Yes.
but it wasn't accepted. But also, like, 600, because this was like the reason everyone in my film clique in high school knew about this movie is it got distributed by Miramax, and it has like
Yep.
a very silly trailer that's mostly Alice Braga and the In a World guy, just in
Yeah.
the slums of Brazil. And I'm just like, we were still doing that in 2004.
Yes, indeed.
Like, I love it as a time capsule, but like, what a dumb way to tell trailers.
Especially to like make them all feel the same
Right.
Yeah.
and just
Isn't that what you want? No. I mean, it used to be even worse. I went and saw, I forget what movie I saw at a revival. It was definitely like it was a Friedkin film because they showed the trailer for The French Connection in front of it. And it was like, spend time with Gene Hackman as he does this and does this and does this. And here's the villain. And then they're squaring off over each other. I'm making it sound like a Rick and Morty trailer. But it really did, like, not just show the entire movie, but in order. It was like a 4.5-minute trailer that ended with a shot that I was pretty sure was going to be like the last shot of the film.
Yeah, I hate when they tell you the whole movie.
Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve.
But
Well,
I also
what's
thought that
nice
was a
about-
new thing. I thought that was a new precedent being set by studios cleaving mystery. And like, nah, it's always been like that.
yeah. I mean, what's
They just
nice
used
about
to not
City of
tell you
God
the
is
plot.
imagine-
They used to.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, we should talk about City of God.
I'm just saying,
Not
imagine
French
trying
Connection.
to bubble that down
Yeah.
effectively, because there are a lot of threads in this film.
There
Hell
are
yeah.
a lot of threads. And I would actually like to hear some of them, but first I don't want to skip over what your connection to City of God is, Gavin.
Honestly, my memory is not so great. But this movie has just lived in my past. I'm sure I probably watched it in film school. It might have been before that. And it's just was part of, this was the type of movie that I felt it grew somewhat out of, like, you'd mentioned Guy Ritchie earlier, who was making this type of film back then more so. It feels very Scorsese, so it was like this type of movie I was seeking out, and it just stays with you because it has so much energy and uniqueness to it. And still watching it, like, you can look at a lot of movies and understand how they're made. This one, to me, still is a puzzle box of just like how much of this was found in editing and what were they doing on set. Like you said, there's a ton of, less experienced actors or non-actors giving some of the best performances I've ever seen compared to a lot of very talented actors who have been doing it for a long time. So it's just kind of like, this is a movie that I look at and I'm not sure I could replicate it without like so much, I don't know how they must have gotten so lucky is what I'm hoping for my own sanity, but it's just an incredible feat.
It's a lot to digest. It does make me wonder, like, how repeatable it is. I'm somewhat nervous about, like, viewing the HBO show, which I haven't even seen a trailer for, but I'm so used to these sort of things being spun into just, like what happened with Gomorrah, the Scorsese-produced Italian crime film that I think I watched about the same time.
That's cool.
I mean, he, put his name on it so that it would get, I don't think,
somewhere.
No. But it's like the original movie is an Italian, almost docu-style, very slow crime movie, and then the HBO series that's based off of it from the same creator is just one of the most wildest handshaking Italian things you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, I did this.
Is that a full-throated endorsement, or?
I mean, I watched 5 seasons of it. I think it's a blast.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. But it's also like you're just watching the shittiest people in the world. There's not even like any good people in the film. You're just like, well, this clear villain is more charismatic than the other person, so I guess I'm on their side until something switches, until he kills his own wife in a fit of rage. Like, I don't even know what to compare it to.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see a City of God sequel series being more of a Narcos, which isn't disparaging, but it's just like that's a different story.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for it. I think it's just following the main character, years later, and he has to go back to City of God and through his photography uncover.
That makes sense because the fight rages on.
Absolutely. But I had the same thoughts, Gavin, about what happened to make this, because I went down and I do this with a lot of movies, like who wrote it, who are the directors, and then I look at the rest of their work. And there's nothing except for the co-director, I was like, did a lot of TV, and I look at some of those projects and they look a lot fluffier, to no disrespect, but more TV-like. The griminess of this movie, I'm like, oh, they made other things that like this. And you can't really find other examples. The writer of the novel, this is like one book, one fiction book. And so like, I feel like a lot of people's just best moment coincided in this movie. And it's maybe like the one they could do together, and this is what happened. So it's pretty magical in a way how this movie.
It's a moment in time for sure that like the movie itself has a very lasting legacy. The people involved in it, a few of them got big. Like the director Fernando Moraes, like I've watched several of his other movies. He followed this up with Blindness, which is more of a miss than a hit, but is kind of a Gavin, you'd hate it. It's one of those I just think about like your reaction to like Quiet Place or some of these sets, Bird Box.
Yeah, I didn't like it either.
Yeah, so it just like Blindness is like everyone has lost their eyes.
One.
Yeah. But there's no monster except for humanity. So I don't know. Maybe it's not bad, but I think, if you don't follow this up with a hit, you don't get, your blank check to just do whatever you want. And like there could have been a world where we got an interesting movie from him every 3 years as opposed to The Two Popes.
Right. Have you seen that one? I'm curious.
Yeah, I have not seen The Two Popes. No, that is one too many popes for me.
I've been avoiding it too, but it's good actors, and I'm like, oh,
it's a sequel to The Young Pope, right?
Got a Best Picture nom, but it was something that it is not a sequel to The Young Pope.
Oh, sequel to The One Pope.
That would just be Pope. Yeah.
Pope.
It goes Young Pope, The Two Popes.
Why didn't they just call it Popes?
Pope. I mean, is
Two
it
Pope, Two Vatican?
I don't know.
3 popes and a baby. Yep. Or wait, no, that's 2
And
popes.
then, I mean, he's been an interesting TV director as well. He's actually the absolutely bonkers Vietnam communist show, The Sympathizer, which stars Robert Downey Jr.
Yes.
as four different people, actually slightly more than four, but four main people,
Four and
sometimes sharing a
change.
scene to each other, four and change, 4.5 Dowdies. That is a Park Chan-wook project. I probably mispronounced that more than any Portuguese that I'm going to say in this episode. And the person that they chose to take over from him, he directed the first 4 episodes, and obviously, the director of Old Boys, very stylistic and a lot of like crazy match cuts, a lot of the craziest things I've ever seen in a TV show. They got the director of City God to take over from there, and like, yeah, there's not too many people who could match that manic energy and just absolutely bonkers choices and 4 simultaneous Robert Downey Jr.'s.
Right.
So
the interesting thing is that these are all things based on great books.
Mhm.
Like The Sympathizer is a great book. Even Blindness was a good book.
it's mostly a great book. I really
so-
don't like how The Sympathizer ends.
Oh yeah, well, I love the book. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
the ending is questionable.
No,
But
I
like,
was
at least it's a very interesting book, and so when I
on
read it, I
board
was
for
like,
90% of the book, but
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes it a questionable recommendation from me.
indeed,
And
indeed.
then from there, you're just
Yeah.
like, we should have never left. Is that?
What?
Sorry, let that
What's the
terrible joke
reference?
sit. That's fine.
Okay. I look forward to you explaining it to me later.
Just nom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
All right. That's fair. It just ends with some questionable philosophical choices that I don't find that interesting to spend
it
entire
got heady.
chapters on.
It got heady for
Um,
sure.
Which I would also, I think, I encourage people to watch that series. I really champion it, but also like the last episode might leave you a little wanting for the same reason.
I look forward to finding out.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Certainly had an opportunity to change that. Yeah, absolutely watch this, Gavin. Before we summarize City of God so that the few listeners who didn't rewatch this movie know what the fuck we're talking about, I want to go a little bit into the history of this project. We've alluded to it being a book. It's somewhat loosely adapted from the book, which is somewhat loosely adapted from real
The truth.
events. This is a movie. I somehow missed this in high school where I thought this was like a real place, but everything else was artificial.
Hmm.
This is a real place. This is a favela on the west side of Rio de Janeiro. I've asked you both to put up your maps if you want to type in City of God and just kind of get an idea of where this is in relation to most of the city and the beaches. Spoiler alert, all of Rio is beaches and it's beautiful. I was there in February and I'll talk a little bit of my experiences in favelas after that. But the favelas kind of arose like they did in a lot of the worlds when urbanization really started stealing people from rural areas. Brazil, like a lot of the United States, was mostly rural, and then in like the 40s and 50s, people started really moving into cities. The timeline doesn't really match up with the United States. I'm just making the point that this is a thing that's happened everywhere. And these slums got set up. And City of God is somewhat an exception to that, was that it was a government-built one that was intended to kind of be suburbs. The idea was to move people from favelas to suburbs, but ended up just kind of being another favela. And these are very closed ecosystems in the sense that one of the things that really separates Rio from maybe every other major city in the world is that the rich people do not live up in the hills. The poor people live up in the hills because the jobs are not in the hills. Yeah, no, I find this absolutely fascinating. And maybe if these had all been developed in times where, telefericos existed, teleferries, or like the infrastructure existed to get people up to these hills, maybe it would have always been rich people's playgrounds, because my God, the views from the top of the favela that I went to is just absolutely breathtaking. Rio's a beautiful city everywhere, but like up from Christ the Redeemer or up on like many of the top mountains, like it's breathtaking. The other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of these places literally have their own currency. Some of them are like nationally recognized and pegged to the I can't say the name still of
Real.
the Real. Yeah.
Real.
Yeah. The Portuguese, I don't know. I'm able to read it because of my Spanish and my French, but
Mhm.
like every time I try to pronounce anything, I learn a new rule about it. For instance, this movie is titled Cidade de Deus, and did not know that the DE makes a J sound until I went there. Yvonne, have you
like-
ever dabbled in Portuguese?
No, like you, I mean, I speak fluent Spanish, and I
Yeah.
can
Well,
hear
you
it
actually
and
speak
understand.
fluent Spanish. I pretend
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Oh, okay, well, yeah, it's my
We've had
first time.
conversations in Spanish. You know
For
my
sure,
limits.
for sure. I understand Portuguese. Right, spitting it back is a different thing.
Yeah. But you
It's
can guess and find words, is
Yeah.
what I found. Is just like, this
For
is
sure.
probably
It
the
sounds
word
like
in
this. I'm
Portuguese.
gonna go
Yeah.
with it for
Yeah.
sure.
I may not be able to pronounce it right, but like writing to people, I could just guess a word
Yeah,
based
yeah.
on Spanish or French, and I'll be right. Or I'll be
Yeah.
close enough that they can correct me.
It's tipsy dancing Spanish, how I would describe it. You're a little
Yeah.
tipsy, so you start slurring a little bit, and then you just gotta move, like dance a little bit, and Portuguese will come out.
A lot of
Yeah.
the Portuguese I've heard too has been in like psychedelic music,
Okay.
because there's a lot of wonderful Brazilian music in like the 60s and 70s. And yeah, it just sounds like, sure, they did enough
That's a good
acid
fit.
and the Spanish
Yeah.
like still almost is
When I do enough
coherent.
drugs, I also make the ow and the zh sounds a lot. Like,
Exactly, there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, shout out those mutantes and
Yeah. I mean, for us English speakers, the equivalent is like you do too much acid and you just start sounding like you're Dutch. That's what Portuguese is to other Latin languages. I don't know too much about the actual history of the events in the film. Like, I learned them through the film.
Mhm.
Obviously, a lot of it's going to be wrong, but like, I don't think, certainly from our vantage point, we need the corrected information. I think just the idea that these are stories that are happening in the world, like, is the value that I really got from watching this.
And there's archival. There's like, there's a character that is
Yeah.
definitely real. He's the actual news clip is shown in the film. So
Yeah.
like, you know,
At
yeah,
the
they do
very
the
end.
side by sides at the end, which again, I had watched this movie at least 5 times in high school and college. This is one of my most watched movies. This is honestly like
Hmm.
whatever bullshit list I made in film school. This was on my top 10 list, which is not a thing I'm capable of doing as an adult, as my views change every day. And also, like, I've just watched too many movies to even have a favorite movie. It
yeah.
depends on how angsty I am that day. Gavin, would you like to give us some broad strokes of what this movie is and how it tells its story?
Sure, I'll give my best attempt at a quick summary.
Hell yeah.
We open with a bunch of armed children chasing a chicken through the favela, and happen upon our main character Rocket, who has a camera in hand and finds himself between a bunch of armed children and armed cops. From there, we go back in time because we need to understand where we're at, and we discover his older brother is part of a gang that kind of set the tone for a more charming and simple understanding of the favela and life there. They're more like cute crime. They, I believe, are called the Tender Trio. And from there, we keep finding more and more characters and slowly catch up in time as we go back in time, more often than not. We meet Little Dice and Benny, who are young kids who hang out with the Tender Trio. Little Dice puts the Tender Trio onto a crime that's their biggest one yet. They rob a motel, and as they get away kind of messily and are chased down by the cops, Little Dice, having finally gotten his hand on a gun, murders a bunch of people. From there, we go forward and see Little Dice's rise to becoming Lil Zay, as he starts consolidating all of the crime in the city of God, while Rocket watches this and sees like his version of the town kind of ripped away from him. He is more really interested in getting laid, and that's a lot of what he's trying to do.
This is a big part of this movie.
Yeah. In his attempts to get laid, he hangs out with a girl who starts hanging out with Benny, who is Little Zay's kind of second in command. Benny tries to get out, and he's kind of the only bit of conscience that Little Zay has, keeping him from going over the edge into fully psychotic murderer. Benny exits the world on his party that he's trying to leave crime behind and go enjoy himself as a psychedelic groovy, as they say. After he's dead, Lil Zay really ups his murderous impulses and starts a gang war by raping a guy's girlfriend and going after the only other independent drug dealer in the city of God. A civil war basically erupts, mostly executed by, again, young children who are armed to the teeth by drug dealing gangsters. And Rocket winds up in a place to photograph some of this. And in one fateful night, he photographs the kind of finale of both charismatic leaders of the gangs being executed. And we assume that he somewhat gets out because he has a job in journalism. But none of the issues are really solved in terms of younger kids with more guns are going to continue, maybe not running the city, but probably filling the gaps that the two charismatic leaders have left.
It's almost as if the fight rages on.
Hey, good.
Yeah.
That was an impossible task to keep
That was
truly
amazing.
coherent.
That was amazing.
Maybe a little bit more bullet points than I want, but actually I applaud. Good job. That's so much better than I would have stumbled through.
I mean, I read somewhere the book was 600 pages, like 100 different characters. The script took like 12 versions, maybe even more. And so what you just did is, pretty amazing as well.
Appreciate the laurels, everybody.
I'd say the movie is very plot heavy, but the consequence of that is like the plot doesn't matter that much. It's certainly like for this conversation, the least interesting thing to talk about, as opposed to the filmmaking and the structure. I really wanted to ask, so Yvonne, you grew up in Chile. When did you move to Oakland?
When I was 15,
Okay.
1995.
And did you when you watched this in college, were you in the US or in Chile?
Yeah, I was in LA.
Okay.
Yeah, I was living in Highland Park.
Oh, I don't know that. All right.
Hood, when it was hoodie.
Yeah, it's a different Highland Park.
In the
was
training
very
day
good.
era, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That was our reaction. If you ever listened to our training day episode, like I can't wrap my head around the idea that like this takes place in a spot that I can't afford rent right now.
Yeah. It's changed a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I live in an area that's famous for being in a riot. Like that is K-Town's biggest legacy.
Huh.
It's fine. I like it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I want to
I was
ask this because you're maybe the only person I know who has actually like actively made films in South America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a one-to-one thing, but like I don't really know how to guide the question, but I would love to know some of the challenges of those experiences. If I remember correctly, like kind of during the pandemic, you went back to Chile and shot a short film, a couple.
I shot a short film. I went twice to do it, and
Yeah.
it wasn't just the pandemic. I went pre-pandemic, like right before it, because there was a social uprising happening
Yeah.
in Chile on October 2019. Massive marches taking over BART stations and then confrontations with the police, and it was massive. And I decided to go film in the middle of that. And so in some ways I relate to, I've been reading how they made City of God, and it was very like in the middle of violence that they were shooting. I mean, they wanted to shoot in City of God. It was too violent, or they didn't get permission. So they went to a different favela next door where they got permission from the head boss. We can talk about that later. But the point is, there's this docu kind of merge with fiction that I was doing that I feel like this movie has a lot. And yeah, I worked with the lead is a non-actress. She's a performer. She's a singer of my short. And so, finding out ways how you can most bring out the best from a new actor is kind of a good challenge. And she acted like herself too. So I feel like that's how this ends up working is you're not asking too much. You're just saying, hey, we're going to give you some lines and some actions, but it's still you in a way. And in terms of the technical or like the more logistical side, it's crazy. Like I had I had desires to do certain scenes that we got, tear gassed and had to literally just run away from the police. Part of my crew was like, yo, this is crazy. Like, I don't know if I could do this. And I was like, man, I'm also like a captain of this ship. I'm just like, dude, we gotta do this. It's like
Is this taking place in Santiago or
in
Valparaiso?
Santiago
Okay.
during the protest, the whole city then shut down. Um, we got pulled up by the police, etc. So
How
I'd
do you?
say things are way more wild, general Latin America. And I'm even sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, like, in terms of dealing with, I've obviously been lots of productions where the cops roll up and they either make you move, they stop you, but I've never been detained or had my footage taken. And I was wondering if that was something you had to deal with in that situation.
No, I didn't get detained, but it's weird. This is what I kind of want to paint a picture of, like the different. So this cops pull up to me, and I'm trying to film the National Palace, the
Mhm.
presidential palace. And I'm doing a scene with my character right in front of it, where she's kind of walking up to it with the intent to kind of throw something, but they didn't see that. And they pull up, and I step up. I got both my Chilean and my U.S. papers. You got to show U.S. shit to, like, give yourself a heads up or like a foot up in the situation.
Yeah.
And then he's going to take my numbers, my documents, and he pulls out this huge paper like document, this binder, and he starts writing it down. And I felt like this was so old school, and it kind of reflects a little bit of the bureaucracy and
Mhm.
and different. I don't want to say third worldness of what we're dealing with, but like, here a cop pulls you up, he goes to a little computer, types it up, that's connected to a whole network, and it tells you something. This guy
Yeah.
literally wrote my name down on a piece of paper, on a notebook, on a fat ass notebook. And so that's just such a different level, I feel, of intelligence and security that's happening. Um, and so I feel like a lot of shooting down there, the difference is that like there's so much leeway, more like things you can barter, and you can like, oh, this is not, you're not allowed to do this, but that's just like a recommendation.
Sure.
You feel me?
It's what you can
Like,
get away with.
Is what you can get away with. And I think a lot of crews are like open to that. Whereas here with all this regulation, there's rules for everything. And even the crew will be like, oh no, that's illegal. No, I won't do that. And you're like,
Yeah.
bro, just pick up a cable. I know it's not your department. Just pick that shit up. Come on. So I feel like there's a lot more flexibility and freedom in how we move South America.
I mean, some of that's also just this movie was made in the 2000s, and I don't know about y'all, but what was it, Rebel Without a Crew? Famously,
Rodriguez doc?
Rodriguez's his book.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
It's so frustrating to read.
Yeah.
Because you're like, you son of a bitch. You walk up to like a prison and ask if you can shoot there, and their response is, sure, do you want to borrow some guns too? It's like, come on, man.
Yeah. The idea
Yeah.
of that like traffic shootout in El Mariachi just being like, let's just do this. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're in, a place that actually has traffic shootouts constantly during this time in the early 90s. And you're just gonna do it. I'm actually reminded of there's a show called Children's Hospital, which the joke through that whole thing is that they work at a children's hospital. Well, it's Arthur Children's Hospital. There's not even kids. And it's in Sao Paulo. But it doesn't matter because it's in a self-contained hospital. So for like 5 seasons, they're just pretending, and occasionally someone will come in speaking Portuguese, but mostly it's like, LA actors coming in speaking English with their problems, and it's just relegated to the background. And then there's one episode where they flew the cast to Brazil and like have them just walking around and just doing a walk and talk, like, but very clearly in Brazil. And they have a gag in the background where like a van pulls up and like kidnaps two people, and like so many cops got called on that and shut down production. It was like, no, you can't do that without getting permits and things, because like this is a fucking thing that happens.
I mean,
Yeah, I think you're right in eras. I did shoot a music video in Chinatown in downtown LA with no permit.
Yeah.
But it's a 10-person crew and we just went and did it. I wonder if you can do that now.
Now, did you have anyone shooting each other in that music video?
No guns. Everybody was dressed like a film noir kind of character.
It sounds like it, from my understanding, because, we can harp on this, but like LA doesn't really have any scalable permitting. There's nothing for smaller productions or indies or short films.
They just fucking raised the price of permitting at the film office.
It's all built around well-budgeted features. But I'm not a lawyer, but what I've been told by certain people is if you look confident enough, you can get away with a lot.
Yep.
The times that I've been in charge of getting permits and stuff, which has been very rare down here, I've never been asked for it. And I've made eye contact with cops. They walked right past. So, I don't know.
The biggest behind the camera thing that I was constantly thinking about while watching City of God is the logistics of getting everything up those hills. Because they're... they didn't get to film in City of God because there was violence. So they shot in two different neighborhoods, Cidade de Alta, which is unfortunately right next to Rio's airport. So I'm imagining that caused a lot of problems and waiting. Although, a lot of this film was pretty ADR. There's a lot of, if you look closely at this film, you could see the cracks in the seams. If you are looking for it, you will see a lot of people looking directly at the camera or at the director, like a lot of extras doing that. But like all those scenes are so chaotic in the way that it's cut together. Really, there might have been less options in the edits, but it doesn't hurt the final film. And then the other area was, I think, Vigado, which is a favela that was right across from the one I actually went and did a tour to in February. Yvonne, I don't think we've actually gotten to talk about this. I went down the whole Amazon this winter.
Nice.
I started in Ecuador, hit every country you could on the Amazon, short of like turning around and going up to Bolivia. Got to go to like three Triple Frontier area, which is pretty safe now. Went all the way down to Belém, and just because of the timing, I hopped down to Rio for Carnival. Ooh. And but I also wanted to explore Rio and do all the cultural stuff. And I'm not too old to go to a party like Carnival, but I am too old to do both that and the hiking cultural trip, because when I go out in the blasting sun and I hike up to Christ the Redeemer or along Copacabana and whatever their fun Sugar Mountain, is that? Yeah. Then I'm spent and I'm taking a nap, and I kind of had to choose every day. And if I'd gone 10 years ago, I could have done both of them and then just slept for 2 days when I got back.
That's dope, though. That's fun.
Yeah, but we did this favela tour with the guy who lived there. And it ended up being in Spanish because the two guests everyone kind of spoke English, but everyone really spoke Spanish best as pretty much everyone's second language. It was the guide's second language, it was the French girl's second language, and it was another guy from LA, I think. So it was really interesting because he would slip in a lot of Portuguese into his Spanish because he just thought no, this must be the word or this must be how it's pronounced. Sure. So I was only able to even follow through that because I'd been in Brazil for a month. But
what are the highlights of a favela tour?
Ooh.
I would say it's mostly... okay, so here's what I really learned from it. You take a motorcycle up to the top and walk down. And just even the winding road going up to the top is phenomenal. And the entire power infrastructure is stolen. So like it's all a mess. You see some of this in the movie because that's certainly, shooting a period piece in a favela isn't that difficult. Might be a little bit harder now because you just have to stop people from walking around on their cell phones. But in 2000, getting it to look like the 1980s is still, most of those buildings are the same as they were from the 60s.
Mhm.
And all the power has always been like stripped from like the power lines running along the main thing and then just divided very unsafely going up the entire favela. It's safe with a guide, I would say, like literally being with a person from there. You've got permission, basically. Like that's a tourism infrastructure that works and has the permission of the local gang lords. And my God, they do exist. One thing that I saw on this tour that I've never truly been exposed to is we went through some alleys and the guide says everything is safe to be, but I will be very explicit on where you can and cannot take pictures.
Mhm.
A lot of basically anytime we were off of the main road, it's just like your phone stays in your pocket. And it's not because someone would steal your phone. It's because there could be consequences if you're snapping pictures, if they think in any way that you're working for police.
Mhm.
And some of these alleys are literally, they will have tables out with bags of drugs and young, handsome gentleman with the short bleached hair and spots in it that's everywhere in Brazil right now, with between 1 and 3 guns on them, let's say. And he would go up and he would talk and he would introduce us to them. And everyone else in the group was so nervous. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing I've ever experienced. This is the only time I'll ever get to encounter these, in their words. He would introduce them as narcotraficos. And then they would all kind of like giggle. And one guy would start like spinning a pistol around and, that's what's making everyone nervous. And I know, like, yeah, it's not great that he's doing this, but also he's showing off for the gringos and it's kind of cute. And he's talking with us, and there's like a couple lines of drug, a couple people in a line who are just like waiting to get drugs and are furious that this is taking their attention away from them. But I want to like iterate, all this is in public. It's in view from the main street. There's literally like this, and then like a fruit store, and then a churro stand, and these are all like you have to walk past the table of cocaine and fentanyl. To get your churros
trip for your churro and
it's fine. Like it's like that is a reality of living. There is violence. There's certainly more. I'm from Alaska. I've definitely never seen as many guns in my entire life as I did for that day in favela. Same with like I've never seen a giant bag of drugs, and I don't mean like a tiny little eighth or whatever. I mean like a trash bag full of like the wrapped kilos that you see in movies. But the other thought that I had as we were walking through these alleys is like, no, this is a maze. Like not only would I get lost here on my own, but like I don't see any actual way that a police force could conduct a raid.
Well, and that's part of what I found interesting when you mentioned that the rich people lived below the hills and the poor people
now in the towers at the base. But
because it does, and the way it's kind of described in this movie too is like it becomes a fortress because they've got the high ground, and on top of that, it just is going to be natural defenses. You've got points where you're going to be protected, especially with a gun if you're doing range, and just knowing how to run. Like, how do you take that on? How do you police?
That's what we would always hear in the news, like forever, is that the police just didn't go in. Yeah, because it was like a death sentence. You just go in there and they're shooting you from every rooftop.
Everything's a kill zone.
Yeah.
Like amplify anything that you've seen about like, we've seen a lot of these movies that take place in Colombia in the 80s and 90s, or even Mexico, and like as you're having a chase scene through these, it's
or Highland Park in the 90s.
It's tight alleys, it's 2-story buildings where people can be up top and like create ambush. Now, escalate all of that and know that you also have a height advantage, and everything else is like yeah. And I will say that like one of the really striking things that I noticed this time watching City of God, we talked a little bit about like how different policing is in different areas, but whatever problems I have with policing and cops in this country, sometimes it puts it into perspective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
When you've had these stories where the cops only exist to be paid off or to be a part of the gang.
Or to arm the gang, yeah.
Yes, in this instance, it's like the gangs are armed by
Arm
the cops.
both gangs.
Yeah, but even that subtle moment where they are running around the favelas to actually capture, murderers who they think are murderers. The trio that committed
trio,
a stand-up before Little Dice decided to walk in and shoot everyone in one of the most haunting scenes I've ever seen. That child laughing while murdering people who are already tied up or naked is the tonal
There's something about
whiplash in this movie.
That kid's stance, even with the gun, like you can tell it's too heavy for him, and his back is like bent to like lift the weight of the revolver.
Yeah.
It's pretty dark.
It's pretty dark. There's a lot of scenes of children shooting people in this movie that is, I mean, it's hard to pin down a genre for this, but like, I don't feel wrong calling it mostly a comedy.
Wow.
This is a pretty fun movie.
It's an exciting movie.
Yeah.
To me,
Action.
what's nice about it is like it itches. I've found that I like movies that are full of stress. And this is a stressful film. I was rewatching it the other night, and it's not that things are telegraphed plot-wise necessarily, but I mean, specifically the character of Little Dice, like anytime he's on screen, you just feel it in your bones that something bad is about to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is a stressful film.
Yeah, I mean, how it's shot, how it's edited adds to that too, for sure.
Yeah, the freneticism and the
I will say they do a good job of like one of the guiding principles while Fernando Moraes was shooting this is like to not glorify violence, which seems somewhat silly given the amount of violence in this movie, but like there is an effort made, like almost all the deaths happen just off screen. Or you're cutting to someone watching it. And that's not a way to sanitize it. That is purely a way to not glorify the violence in a movie where it is a lot of it's like, look how much fun these criminals are having. Or like, the emphasis put on like Benny is the coolest hood and everyone loves him. I'm like, we've watched him murder people. We've watched him enable Little Z. There's even one moment with Little Z at the dance where it's just like the performance. You feel bad for him for a second because he doesn't know how to talk to women, and that's always kind of like, oh yeah, no, he never had an upbringing where he would learn that, and then you remember it's just like, oh yeah, but he just uses force on women, and there are multiple sequences of him raping people. So the fact that the movie could make me forget that for a little bit through calculation is like really impressive.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing in terms of the portrayal of violence. Like I'm a huge critic of violence, Hollywood especially. And I really valued how this film, the whole point of it is to describe it as a sick condition. And it's systemic. I mean, it's being weapons fed by the police.
Yeah.
To keep this thing where it's at. And all the way to the final scene, like he walks away with his camera, he got a photo, he has a future, but then you see the little kids behind him.
Oh God.
Little kids with guns.
What a way to end a movie.
Right? And it's just telling you this is going to just keep going and going.
Because they have literally planning their hit list.
They are making a list of people they want to kill, just like in order to be the top. Who of us knows how to write so that we can organize our list of people we children should murder?
Right. But the whole film kind of sets it on like a economic perspective. Like it all shows you how it starts in a town that has no resources. So to get just the basic things covered, these three dudes did steal just gas and give it away. So they're not stealing just for personal gain a lot.
They're Robin
Hooding out of necessity. And so I find that really interesting. That's a commentary. And then one of the baddest characters is, I guess they translate him as Knockout Ned. You see him start as a really good dude, and like served in the military and then was working just to make ends meet to get out of. And then because of everything that happens to him, he falls into the same cycle. So I felt like all this commentary did do a good job of not glorifying the violence, but like showing it as an illness and just kind of a disease that's happening to everybody.
I mean, even Little Zay, like continuously part of his reason for murdering is because he's trying to keep order within the favela, and under his, rule, there isn't robberies. People feel safe doing business.
He's the only person that gets to murder people.
Yeah, people feel safe coming in and spending money. They talk about tourism being up in City of God specifically because of his ability to rule with an iron fist and murder people.
Which is like a scale of dictatorship we see all around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, not to get too distracted, but we were talking about like protests in Chile earlier, and we're recording this on September 11th.
Indeed.
I'm curious, Gavin, if you know what, I mean, Yvonne should, if you're willing, if you want to tell us the first half of your life, 9/11 was an important date for a very different reason, right?
For sure. I mean,
what happened on 9/11?
There was a military coup in Chile on 1973 on September 11th. It was a Tuesday, just like the September 11th here in 2001. And pretty much the military took over, led to the killing of the president, or suicide, nobody knows, and just completely devastated the country. Turned into a 17-year dictatorship. A lot of people were killed, tortured, exiled, my family included. My grandfather was put in prison and tortured, and then my father and family left. That's how I was made. And so for all my life, September 11th, and for all Chileans throughout the world, out of exile community, that's like a day of mourning, and you gather and remember and mourn. And so it's a heavy, heavy day. And then then it happens here,
and now it's overshadowed.
I have two 9/11s to think about. But but in terms of like brutality and police and violence, like that's something very real to us.
Yeah, Pinochet's on some real Little Z shit.
On some real Little Z shit, and all his homies. And I'm writing a screenplay about one of these generals that tortured, and then the sick thing that happens is they just leave and come to the U.S., where they give up a little secrets, and then they're protected by a CIA witness protection program, and they live in Miami like nothing happened. And that's real. Yeah. And so Chile tries to extradite them, Spain tries to extradite them, but the U.S. refuses. And so these little Zays are walking around Miami, chilling, protected by a CIA.
It's some real boys in Brazil shit.
Real. Yeah.
It's actually, have you seen, there is a short film with Gabriel Garcia Bernal. I'm going to mess up the name. Ojos en la Nuca? But it's about like the last kind of duel in Chile, and it was about like he plays this guy going back to have a duel with a general that killed his father, basically.
I haven't seen that.
It's short. It's good. They showed it to us not even in film school. I think in like Spanish class in high school.
Oh wow.
Or in college, I forget. All those Spanish classes blur together.
Yeah, check it out.
All right, now tell them what a terremoto is.
You experienced it more recently than I have. Don't drink it, y'all. I don't.
It's not relevant. Ask me again at the end if you want to know.
Want to get wasted? We got the recipe for you.
Another interesting fact about the filmmaking of this: they selected 200 non-actors from the favela, and then there's a couple more traditional actors. No one really had like a ton of experience. None of these people are famous. Alice Braga is obviously the girl Angeline. What's her name in this? No. I now know her from other things more. Like she got a Hollywood career, and she still shows up as a supporting character in a lot of things. She was just in Suicide Squad. And famously, I Am Legends, Repo Men. Like she got, a starlet career in Hollywood. And then the other person who also did that was Seu Jorge. Again, I don't know how to pronounce Portuguese names. Who's a famous musician who contributed a lot to the soundtrack. He plays Knockout Ned. And he's in most of the Wes Anderson movies. Like that was
very, very much featured in Life Aquatic for sure.
Basically does the whole soundtrack to Life Aquatic.
Which is an incredible soundtrack.
Yeah.
And Alicia Braga is related to a famous older actress called Sonia Braga, which was huge for us. Like something of the Spider Woman, that's a classic.
Oh, okay.
movie.
Yeah, Curse.
So
But
So
everyone else is non-actors selected from the City of God slum mostly, and some surrounding areas. And then they were kind of giving a non-traditional acting camp that really focused on like simulating these gang wars and being comfortable in front of a camera and like really focusing on improv. And the result of that is like this movie is insanely improv. Like all these things that feel like nice little real touches were just like, developed on set. Even that very last shot where the kid like runs back because he's forgot his sneaker, like that is absolutely.
it just happened. He
Yeah.
kept it. Yeah. Yeah, there's a prayer scene that like
Oh yeah.
the
Also
kids are
improv.
like the kids are all from the favela and they're like, well, before we do something big, like before we rob something or attack something, like we pray. Are we not going to pray before this scene? And the
I love
director was
that.
like, all right, yeah, go ahead. So they do a
Any
little circle and they do their thing and they just filmed it.
I am all about any time in a movie where criminals stop and be like, "Dear God, please give us the courage we need to do this crime against our fellow humans."
Hey, for real. So yeah, I like that, all those elements that you can tell are improvised and just came up. I mean, you can't tell, but as a director, you think about it and you're like,
Yeah.
I know where this director's from. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think he was able to get such nuance. That's why I was really curious who were the co-directors.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Yeah.
they're not from the hood. They don't know really what. So it's pretty amazing. They must have given a lot of liberty for a lot of people on set that did know what was real.
I'm really
And
curious what the screenplay would look like in that case, because I don't know if that's out there.
Right,
Probably
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
What that looked like before, because again, so much of this feels like so frenetic and improvisational is one thing, but just I don't know how you even begin to think about the coverage in this. Like even just that chicken sequence in the
Yeah.
beginning that it opens with, there's like
Let's talk
such an
about that.
incredible amount of shots.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like the freneticism and just like, is this found in the edit? How much of this can even be planned?
Yeah. And
I
again,
don't
like
know.
shooting around real environments, not having ITC or lockup, I'm assuming.
One,
Like-
you're carrying at least one camera package up into these
Yeah.
locations, like you're saying, maybe two. You're shooting on Super 16, which means you got to bring all your stock in. There's, this is,
All the way up those hills.
yeah.
I mean, they probably camped out.
Yeah.
You don't think they just got a couple houses and stayed up there? I
Yeah,
heard the
and-
director, the actor that plays Zanahoria, I forget what his name is. He's the white drug dealer, the one that they end up getting the Civil War. Like
Carrot?
Carrot.
Yeah.
He was an unknown actor, and then they casted him, and then he blew up in something.
Oh.
And so he was famous. And the director was like, man, like you're famous now. I don't know if I want you. He's like, don't worry, I'll disappear. And he moved into the favela for 3 months before shooting to like learn it, be in it. So I feel like maybe the crew did similar things.
Entirely possible. I wish more people had blown up from this. I watched the documentary of the 10 years later thing, and it shows them all. I mean, everyone blew their shot at like choosing between like just payment of kind of like $3,000 is what the lead made on this, which keep in mind this is in Brazil, 3,000 US, like 10,000.
Yeah.
But like there's all footage of them. Like keep in mind these are kids from the slum, like in tuxedos at like Cannes Film Festival. Like that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. But they could have taken a percentage of the sales,
Yeah.
and they were 25 more money than that.
Were they offered that? Was that like
Yeah,
a,
That was
offered-
option, or like you can get it at the box office.
I mean,
Basically,
how
like you
are
can work
gonna
for points.
know?
Yeah, and
how do
especially
you-
like money in hand in these communities is like.
Yeah,
But also,
no-brainer.
most of these movies don't blow up. There's so
No,
many City
I-
of Gods that I've never even heard of that are. I mean, a lot of them are probably in the same category of talent and value.
I have
like-
points on a few projects, and like some of them I had to do extra paperwork for, and it barely felt worth. Like as I was doing it, I was like, "Why am I even doing this paperwork? The points on this back end aren't going to be worth it. This
You're about
is
to be rich
literally."
in 10 years, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, can
That's
we
how I
talk
feel
about that
about-
opening scene?
Yeah.
That opening scene, I've actually shown it. I've been invited to colleges and speak sometimes about just film, whatever.
Yeah.
And I've shown that opening scene because to me it's one of the best opening scenes in film ever, in my opinion. And not just because I was cut and everything and setting up the tone of the place, all that, the characters, but to me, you get to have empathy and be placed in the mind of a chicken, which is genius already, right? And I've shown this to kids and they're like, no, the chicken. And they like really understand the need to survive
Yeah.
and how you're being. And the whole opening scene is just a metaphor of the main character's journey, or like of the experience of somebody in this movie is you're just being chased down violently and all you want to do is just survive and get away. And so it sets up that journey so well using another living thing. I think it's pretty damn genius.
There is one thing that's really missing from the Western translation for that even just adds to it when you see it the second time, and that's Knockout Ned's real name was Chicken Money.
Yeah.
Which, they changed because, well, we don't want people thinking he's a coward in the United States.
But he used to steal chickens, I guess.
Yeah.
So
But also it's like in the scene, like in that timeline, they're actually hunting a man named Chicken, and they're also doing this thing with chicken. Like,
correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the deepest thing in the world, but as an added layer to what is already a metaphor. Like, I like that.
For sure. And in terms of coverage, you made me think, Gavin, about the scene. Like, I do think a lot of it was planned, because the scene, for example, when Lil Zay, well, that's when he reveals his change in name. When he comes into what they call Blackie's territory and says the apartment's mine.
Yeah, I'm Big Dice now.
I'm Big Dice now. That scene, they return to it like 3 times.
No, that sequence is incredible, where they do it throughout the years and the different owners.
No, not just that. That's also dope. But like, they go into that scene and then we flash back to something else.
Yeah.
We come back.
This person was also there. What did this person think about it?
And it's covered differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The same entrance of Lil Zay is covered 3 different ways. And I thought that was like, and it's so well done, each from a slightly different perspective.
Yeah. You see the bank heist multiple times. This movie keeps introducing people. You're never as sure how important someone's going to be. Sometimes, the narrator will stop and be like, we're going to come back to this guy. Keep your eyes on Knockout Ned, because some shit happens. He becomes the most important character for the last 40 minutes of the movie. And it's constantly doing that. But there's Alice Braga's boyfriend in the earlier parts really just seems like someone who's going to disappear, and he's like, no, he's there. We're going to do a whole subplot where he teaches Benny how to dress, and they give him money. We're going to spend 10 minutes on him going on a fashion journey. This is something, if they really focus on that, if they're just telling stories from the favela, absolutely a TV show is the right way to do. Just do a bunch of bottle episodes of just like someone trying to get a drug dealer some nice shirts.
Right.
Yeah.
That's some book stuff. That's why adapting of a book sometimes is so hard, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of movies fail because you're like, that's important in the book, but it just didn't fit in the movie.
Yeah. It's just
somehow
texture.
in this film, all these feels like random segues or like tangents really work out.
The texture's all important.
What it feels like to me is a series of short films that all fit together chronologically. I think about it in terms of like Paris Je t'aime, New York, I Love You, or they actually made one in Rio that I haven't seen. I think Fernando Morales does a section of it. But all those sort of this is a mosaic film in a lot of ways, but it also just happens to work chronologically. Yeah.
Yeah, Rocket's really more of a through line than a main character in a lot of ways.
I would not say he's the main character of this
He disappears for a good chunk of the film, for sure.
Yeah, he really does, because we got to watch, the shopping journey and get the entire story of every building that we live in.
Right. The Civil War, he's pretty much gone. All that fighting.
He's like, I'm back and I work at a newspaper.
Yeah, I'm going to catch the moment.
I also really love the idea, the opening scene, like we talked about the chicken part, but then we introduce he's still our viewpoint, our protagonist, Rocket, and he's just caught between some cops. And, we think he's just in trouble from the gang. My cat's going ham in the background. And we just assume, this is the worst day of his life. And through the movie, nah, that's just another day.
Yeah.
That's just And it's not even, he thinks it's dangerous, but Little Z is thrilled to see him because he wants more pictures.
Yeah. No,
Like-
to him it is a life or death moment. It's
Yeah.
just that he's had a lot of life or death moments.
And Little Z has certainly never been open enough to anyone that like anyone would be able to predict how he will actually react in any
Yeah.
situation. You know, that honestly, maybe my favorite scene in the film is just there's a long-haired character named Tuba who is
God.
just like he's got his arm over him and he's being real annoying and talking too much, and Little Z just shoots him in the head, and they're just like, yeah, I wouldn't be that friendly with Little Z no matter how long I'd known him.
And that's almost a throwback because throughout the film, Tuba is presented in the same way with people telling him, shut the fuck up,
shut
Tuba.
up.
Yeah.
Talk too much. And
Yeah.
they cost him.
And it's just like, you know, I don't love the casual murderer, but like I'm glad I don't have to hang out with Tuba anymore in this
That's right.
movie.
Yeah.
That makes me think though about Benny. You said he shot people too. I want to invite folks to really look at the details of the movie. I don't know if Benny ever shoots somebody.
He
Because that made me think of
is
that.
certainly laughing while Little Z shoots.
He's
people.
around for sure.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
there's that famous scene where like Lil Z shoots down and then
Yeah.
Benny's shooting up. And like he stops Lil
He
Z
does
from
stop a couple murders.
shooting
Yeah.
a lot of times.
I mean, he's
so I feel
coded
like-
as the good guy, but
Right.
like
And so
not
it's
as
The
much
interesting
coolest
as
HUD and
Yeah.
the coolest hood.
Sure.
yeah.
It was
No, I mean,
sad,
he's
man.
there
When he
for all
dies,
those sequences
they did a
laughing
good
as Little Z
job
does the awful
to make
shit.
us like him though.
Yeah.
Like, you really want him to get out, want him to survive.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah. No, and the heartbreak of like that whole sequence, which like, you know, we talked about it earlier, but it is almost, you believe for a second that like you see the attempt for Little Zay to like turn around his life too, which is just asking a girl to dance with him. And just
all
goes
those
much
turns
darker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you really feel bad for that rapist.
I mean, that's what, you know, I've been writing and I have this villain who I hate and is based on a real character.
Yeah.
And a lot of notes are like, can he be more human? You know, can you make us care for him?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
I think this is
difficult
the
to do.
shortcut to that.
Well, there's a
It's
fine,
nice to care about them for a scene.
yeah.
You don't
And
have to take that with you for the
Right.
rest of the movie. But
there's
like,
a fine line between comically evil and interestingly evil too. And I don't know exactly where that lies, but I've read scripts where my concern would be that the person is so comically evil to the point of like, why are they even doing these things? They're outside of the necessary or interesting reasons to be like that much of a jerk. But everything about Little Zay like reads to the core of his character and is reinforced in a way that I find interesting and terrifying and believable within the confines of the story.
And it's interesting because it's hinting at major insecurities as
Sure.
a character. Right?
Absolutely.
It's how he looks, just being hella little kid. There's no parents. Like it's hinting at all this flaws that he sees that he just replaces with violence.
before we get into what feel like pretty obvious final judgments, I wanted to pick your brains a little bit more about the cinematography, and specifically about this is a movie that deals with film camera. And like when a camera is introduced into this movie, no one knows how to use it, just like no one in this movie knows how to use a fucking gun. If we're being clear, like the way that people shoot guns in this movie is insane, including the police. They are just running and like thrusting their guns as they shoot at people. It's insane. Possibly very realistic and like structured.
I mean, they talk about, Knockout Ned's the only one who has any military training.
And he's
He
worth
says-
50 people because he knows how to actually shoot a gun.
Right.
It is not, also just imagine how hard it is to live in a favela when guns aren't being aimed.
Yeah,
A lot of
But anyway,
Use
we're not
bullets.
talking about guns, we're talking about cameras.
sure.
Did either of you like grow up shooting film photography or dealing with darkrooms?
my dad for sure was always had a camera around and shot film, and so I had that around me. And then I was lucky that in college my school still did film, and at that point UCLA, USC had already stopped. And I was in
Really?
this-
For
yeah,
photography or for video?
in the film program.
Okay.
And so I shot film and did a few shorts in film. I've done some archival in film. But growing up, no, I never touched like a Bolex. I didn't have
Yeah.
that going on. It was way later.
Yeah, similarly, I got to shoot at some in school. And I remember like in high school, we had high school or middle school, we had the opportunity to do film photography, and I believe I applied for it, but for some reason it didn't work out with my schedule, and I wound up taking like pottery or something instead. And it haunts me. It's a bummer.
Yeah.
I did get to shoot 16 millimeter in college because SF State still had a program that put that to use. And I got to try out a few different cameras. Like I have friends who own Boluxes and RE SR2s, and I always liked shooting on, I think it was the Eclair. There's a French camera that I really enjoyed.
The Beaulieu too.
Yeah, but I haven't done it in forever. It's really hard to justify.
It's time consuming. It's expensive. Like I'm not even coming at it from video. I've never shot anything on any sort of film. I've gotten to work on sets with film, but in the capacity of microphones. But like being in a darkroom at high school, which I imagine my high school still has a darkroom and does that because they're not going to retrofit it with anything, but it might not be supplied the same well. And like film is just like one of those magic anomalies that just kind of works through happenstance and chance is how I always look at it. It's just like, no, we figured out some weird chemical stuff, as opposed to like putting stuff on an SD card makes sense to me in a way. Like the lens makes sense. It's capturing light on film is insane. And maybe the only missed opportunity I have in this movie is I would have loved a scene where Rocket gets exposed to the actual darkroom, because he just says other people develop the film the whole time.
Right.
I don't know how you film things in a darkroom. I guess they've done it in movies before.
The red light. You just put a red light.
Yeah, red light. Yeah, night is blue, dark rooms are red.
No, and it's like because the thing too is that people don't think about it that way much. Film is kind of this magical process, especially now that we're doing much of our retouching digitally, which this was already at a time where I'm sure they're doing a lot in post. That's how you have those freeze frames with zooms and stuff. Like you can't do that in camera on 16.
No.
But back in the day too, people really did understand how to use those chemicals, and you would go in and do what people do in Photoshop now chemically.
Which is even more insane to me. Just like, no, well, we're going to make it more green with this thing. I'm just like, guys,
or
the
even
risk
like parts
involved
of an image being adjusted.
Right.
With
literal
different
destructive
chemicals.
editing.
The corner.
Yeah. So there is
cutting
just
out those lightsabers and shining.
I mean, you look at like, Blade Runner and all that, where you're like poking little holes and shining lights through miniatures. Like there's a whole magic that, like, if you look close enough, all of those processes are now being done digitally, but with like, they're built on the backs. When you get to the people who are actually making this stuff happen, even if they're like moving from a model to a digital model, there's still so much cleverness that's coming through. Like, the creator has its faults, but like as a image and a film that like is being created with budget in mind, you still have to think about all the posts that we're doing, and all like the effects that we're doing have to come from a place of budget and limitations, and are built upon the cleverness that is dated way back to putting a camera close enough to a train that makes it look like it's going to hit you.
But I was lucky, and I shot 16 3 years ago. We were doing a doc, and I had this character who's just talking about when he's in a coma, he had all these dreams. And I was like, man, I have a lot of archival that's like old from the VHS, like bad quality. So the whole film has a lot of different textures. And I was like, if we could just afford to shoot these dreams in 16, like I'd be so happy. And we budgeted, and we had like 8 rolls that we could afford, counting with the processing and everything. And we shot it. And it's that crazy feeling of like you've not seen a little screen telling you exactly what it looks like. You're almost like just hoping for the best in a lot of ways. But it came out amazing. It's beautiful when you get those light leaks, just like different things are happening. It has such a rich texture. I love it. And it was super fun.
Was that 16 or 8?
16. Yeah, we shot a Bolex, cranked it up, and it's perfect for dreams, right? I think if I wanted a cleaner, more perfect image, I think it would take a lot more. But for this, it was like the old little lenses that camera has. It looked very dreamlike.
Yeah.
Very cool. Gavin, would you like to tell our guest our rating systems? Because I believe it's about that time.
Sure. We look at these films and we say, are they still good? Are they better as a memory? Or should we chase them down the favela with an army of children armed to the teeth and blast them in the middle of the street?
Those are, as always, those are the three options.
Yeah.
Yes. And you want an answer right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. This movie is still good. This is still one of my favorite movies, but I don't think I really harped enough on this movie's sense of place and feeling like a real place that I wasn't familiar with in high school. So this didn't just affect me on my journey of filmmaking. This is something that really affected me in my love of travel, which is, the other half of my personality, if I'm being honest. Like, I went to Rio. My trip down the Amazon wasn't even planned to go to Rio, but it coincided with Carnival. And like, this movie is one of the places that's always made me want to explore Rio, especially knowing most of Rio is not what's depicted here.
Yeah, I was
like,
going to say.
Most of it's like when they go to that nice beach area. I think that's Copacabana. Like I think you're contractually obligated to shoot at Copacabana when you shoot in Rio. Now, I'm basing this on the mountains in the background, but like, oh shit, I was, on that actual beach spot, I believe.
You smoked a joint there too?
The last thing I did in Rio was we did mushrooms on the beach in Carnival right before I went to the airport.
Wow.
Just a light amount, and it was heavenly. And 4 p.m. rolled around, and the local Fred's like, no, we actually need to leave right now. And I kept looking around and thinking, like, we've got so many people here. How could we not be safe? And, like, I'll take their word for it. It might not matter. No one's going to stop someone from robbing me.
Yeah.
So, like, that's where this really shines. Inventive storytelling, everything else we've said. I got no problems with this movie. It's, the top 10 list doesn't exist anymore, but if it did, it'd be on there. I had it I cheated. I had it share space with Slumdog Millionaire, but now that I've rewatched this, I really want to go back. I love Slumdog Millionaire. That's also a movie that sent me to India.
Yeah, it's a great
and
film
is
too.
a co-directed film, and like it's got a lot of parallels. And we even thought about doing this in season 2 as a versus, but I'm glad we're doing it this way. Still good.
Yeah,
Still good.
It's definitely it's a cinematic achievement. It's just such an amazingly crafted and performed and built film. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it sucks.
Yeah.
Fair.
No.
Way to heal.
It's great. I mean, I'll tell you guys this. I rewatched it on the weekend, and Sage, I got stepkids now. You don't even know this about me.
What?
Yeah. And so I got 2 stepdaughters. Well, I got 3, but I was with the daughters, and she was like, I want to watch Quiet Place. Can I please watch Quiet Place? And I was like, hell no. Too violent. And then I was like, but actually I have to watch this movie, which I consider one of the greatest movies ever. And I know I always tell you guys not to watch violent things, but this is a really good movie. So I'm going to let you guys watch it. She's 13 and other
You get to
girls
explain
15.
what a whorehouse is.
Oh, man. And the other girl's 15. And I was like, matter of fact, I said, I'll bet you that if this movie's not in your top 3 by the time we're done, you can watch Quiet Place. She was like, what, for real? I was like, yeah, but you got to be real with me. Don't lie to me. Top 3.
Yeah.
And she was like, all right. And so by the end of this movie, 15-year-old said, this is the best movie I have ever seen. This is my favorite movie. And the 13-year-old looked at me and goes, top 4. So he's going to watch Quiet Place, I guess. But yeah.
Well, I'm happy to have the Gen Z mark of approval.
Gen Z is still into it.
Is that even Gen Z at this point? Or are they Gen Alpha?
I don't know what they are, but
it's hard to tell. Do they say skibbity?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's Alpha. I don't know. I don't matter anymore is the sad truth of it. No, as an old person, I get to be more invested in business decisions, which is why I wanted to share it with you that we actually, our fledgling streaming company, Gavin, what's the name of our streaming company?
TBD.
Okay, yeah, the Still Good Plus. Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually acquired the rights to City of God, which is great because we've got the whole library, and like, let's be honest, HBO was going to write it off for tax reasons and
Absolutely.
not release the second one. Maybe the first season would disappear, but that means we got all of City of Men, the TV show that followed it up, that I was going to watch for this podcast, but I realized pretty fast in that they don't actually follow characters from City of God. They just reuse two of the same actors and recast them for other stories. So I still want to watch that at some point, but it didn't actually seem that relevant. It actually stars Lil Dice, like Douglas Silva, that kid, as a different person. And it's telling a different story.
Wait, is that the young actor or the
young actor?
Yeah. Okay.
You know, the old actor didn't really, like, you could see him in the documentary as like, yeah, no, he's kind of fat with kids now, and I love that for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's happy. I hope he's happy.
He seems very happy. It's like, yeah, look at this cool thing I got to be. And that's everyone's reaction to it. No one was bitter about it, but
that's super
also
awesome. Yeah.
They're telling a specific story with the documentary. I think they'd cut that.
Sure.
Right.
It's very much a celebration.
Sad story, though. I got to tell you guys, I did see this in the news. The guy who plays, I think Blackie is what they called him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
He ended up being arrested in a raid at City of God and is now like a vagrant homeless dude on drugs streets. And there's a news report about him. And so that's a sad.
That's tragic. I know he got pinched for robbing like a lady's purse on the bus at 19.
Yeah.
I don't know if this was that or later. It's been, 12 years since that documentary.
Right. So
this is an old movie.
Yeah. With some real characters.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have that. I'm still not certain how excited I am about this new show, but I'm absolutely going to check it out. But more importantly, we have the opportunity to reboot it like we do on most episodes, because I think that's the most profitable way.
We're reviving a canceled undercover police program from the 80s.
Oh, it's not a remake, it's a reboot.
You see, the guys in charge of this stuff lack creativity.
What the fuck is a reboot?
So all they do now is recycle shit from the past.
We're working on less of a shriekful and more of a screamake.
Expect us all not to notice.
I like it. Another!
What I want to know is, where in the world would you like to, something that's not represented, that you'd really like to see this sort of crime mosaic tale coming of age story? Like, this got to be my introduction to Rio, and specifically the concept of favelas. Slumdog Millionaire was that entry to a lot of people for Indian slums. Doesn't necessarily have to be a slum, but like, what's an area you've always wanted to explore that you'd like to see this type of movie in?
Wow.
Oh no, did I not prep you that I was going to ask this?
I thought we were going to
honestly forgot to.
Yeah.
Gavin, we do this every time.
Almost.
I thought we were going to do reboots of anything. But the specifics of a crime.
We got to keep the streaming service alive, and like,
That is
better
true.
us than anyone else.
We're fiduciarily responsible.
I mean, I got a movie that takes place in Oakland in 2001, which has crime and has some weed smuggling. So if we can make my movie, that'd be awesome. I think Oakland does have that bad reputation,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been quite a few films where that's it. But I feel like it's never been with the nuances that this movie brings, that has like a social critique, some class analysis, and some diversity. I mean, I would tell it obviously from a very kind of immigrant perspective.
Yeah.
So I feel like films where immigrants are not so one-dimensional in U.S. cities is definitely still necessary, and bilingual characters.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I saw a movie in Paraguay, and
Really?
I was like, "Wow, I've never seen a movie in Paraguay."
I've never met anyone from Paraguay.
So how about we make a crime movie about the border
please.
of Paraguay and Brazil? That's an amazing location.
Yeah. In the swampland area, or like we could have someone have to go in a barrel escaping over Iguazu Falls.
Man,
I'm taking the Netflix action model.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Because it's a free trade zone, right? It has this well, there's just no regulation. Seems pretty interesting.
Yeah. I tried to tag on to. I should have done it because the job I was supposed to come back for canceled on me. But like Iguazu, I didn't get to go when I went to Buenos Aires either, and that's like always. And I'm a waterfall kid. Like I
got a
made
better
I
one.
made my way to Victoria Falls. I've been in the Devil's Pool.
Nice. How about Alaska? Have you had your City of God in Alaska?
I don't know what that would be.
Hey, polar bears be going
so
crazy.
no, our version of that is like, here's the crime stories in Alaska. It is there are serial killers living remotely in the woods. That's like the Butcher Baker story on Frozen Ground would be an example of that. But like, I don't know, Alaska's not famous for its crime stories, which is not to say Anchorage doesn't have its share of violent crime, and is actually one of the kind of biggest immigrant communities in the United States.
What?
I bring this, so it's an asylum center. Like it is where a lot of people get sent to when they're requesting asylum from war zones. So we end up with, we have a big Samoan population. We have a big, I don't actually know how that factors in, but we do. A big Hmong population, which is more obvious. There's a Syrian population. And, you know, I don't know if this is just like they're sent there or like a couple of them are sent to Alaska and then that is where the family base is. That's obviously how a lot of these communities pop up.
Yeah. Hey, that's super interesting.
I grew up with a very different dynamic than I think exists in the majority of the United States. There's not like a large represented Mexican or Latin population, although they're there. They're just not the same numbers as anywhere else in the United States. Same with black people. Didn't grow up with a lot of black people. There's kind of a joke of like why you wouldn't find a lot of black people in Alaska. It's very cold. I don't blame anyone who doesn't want to live in Alaska.
Right. I mean, that's what I was saying. The culture shock for a lot of these immigrants must be off the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's and there are like integrated native communities, which is a thing that I truly miss the further south that I moved. Even in San Francisco, where like I'm aware of the Ohlone, right? The
Ohlone, yeah.
I'm still second guessing it because like I haven't had significant interactions with people, and like I had a native Alaskan girlfriend in high school.
Right.
I had friends that went to my school, and like they were very represented in my day-to-day life. So maybe the answer is actually like setting something in a native Alaskan community, a lot of which are devastated with very similar problems to what's happening to other Native Americans, where their way of life has been either devastated or commodified, and even biologically, a lot of people from this side of the hemisphere didn't develop what's the word I'm looking for? It's the relationship with alcohol.
Sure.
Yeah. Which hopefully is an actual biological thing, and I'm not doing like a huge accidental racism.
I think it's
their
hard
skulls
for a
are
lot of
different
bodies.
shapes, Yvonne.
Jesus.
Yeah. I hope I didn't actually do that.
I don't think you did, but I also don't.
I mean,
come
my
from a place of
actual
knowledge.
thought out reboot answer is I think about that scene in Inception where he's in Mombasa before the movie actually turns sci-fi. And like just the way he has to run through those alleys.
Yeah.
And just like that's a part of the world I've seen very little from that isn't like just like rebel stories. And like I would love to see, you know, not just one person's story, but like City of God, the advantage is you're seeing 20 people's stories mosaicked and just like this is real people and this is maybe what day-to-day life is like for them, but it's also wacky and fun and like you enjoy spending time in this area that you don't actually want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
What you made me think about was I was racking my brain for like a music scene that I'd like to see, because weirdly, like in this movie, like the hierarchy of needs is it's drugs, and they talk about the scenes in music. They refer to people as soul or groovies.
Yeah. Or the samba people, which like only gets represented a little bit, surprisingly.
Yeah. And
my God, samba is everywhere.
The place that I'd kind of like to see, I remember listening to a podcast going to town and interviewing a lot of people in the scene, but I haven't seen that much that's taken place in Cuba, aside from it being like the Fast and the Furious going and like having a street race in Cuba because it's beautiful. They've been, you know, it is almost locked off in like a certain, because of, you know, our embargo on them. There's
been extremely few like American productions that have even gotten to shoot in Cuba. I think the closest you're getting wasn't Guava Island shot in Cuba. Wasn't that like one of the first ones?
Maybe. And I mean,
Maybe.
that doesn't take
Yeah.
place in Cuba. That takes place on Guava
No,
Island.
that was a cool one where they used Cuba as a different place.
Right,
But like,
right,
no,
right.
it'd be great to get this story in Havana
That's
on the
dope.
ground.
Yeah.
I
There's
will
a
also
series.
say not much crime in Cuba.
Yeah, but there's a series
They have a
that
little Z in charge.
was on Netflix for a little bit called Seasons of La Habana,
Oh.
Estaciones de La Habana,
Hmm.
or Cuatro Estaciones. I'll look it up, but like it was dope. It's a police crime drama, and it has one of their more famous actors, and it's 4 episodes. It's a miniseries, and it was dope, really dope.
That sounds cool. But in terms of like economic fringe, the story of like Los Frikis and the AIDS epidemic in Cuba before they really knew how to deal with it.
Oh.
There were people self-infecting themselves with AIDS, and they formed a colony of HIV positive kind of fringe society that was more associated with music. It was a big punk movement in Havana, based on that, and like these people kind of self-isolating via, unfortunately, like a misunderstood disease. But I think that'd be really interesting to look at as a subculture and see a story taking place there of people who are trying to, form community in a way that is toxic despite their knowledge, or against their knowledge, without their knowledge of it.
Good. All right, let's make it.
Sounds great. Well,
It's called 4 Seasons in Havana.
Okay.
Yeah, I want
Great.
you guys. Good.
Well, we got a little bit of time for recommendations. If you liked City of God, and it sounds like we were all enamored with this movie, what are some other things you would recommend an audience check out?
Well, there's a documentary called Favela Rising, which opened my eyes to the favela world also, and it's made by a Bay Area kid. That's dope. I don't know. This movie makes me think about Amores Perros a lot, which is another favorite movie of mine, which
Mhm.
also had this like multi-stories converging thing. It has
We
3
hope to
different
have
stories.
you back to
Yeah, I
talk
haven't
about
seen
that
that
as
in
well.
forever.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean,
I've
I'd
never
love to
seen
rewatch
it,
it.
which
Really?
was a surprise to me when I
Wow.
double checked. Yeah, I've seen everything else from that director, and I'd skipped Amores Perros. I've also like never got around to actually watching Y Tu Mamá También. So like I've still
They're
got
both
gaps.
great.
yeah.
And
So, yeah,
also,
Amores Perros has that same. It has a similar vibe in a way, not
Yeah.
just texture-wise.
yeah,
Very similar.
I mean that is a director who does. I don't know why I'm blanking on that very famous man. Inarritu, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does a lot of mosaic movies. He did Babel. He did 21 Grams.
Yep.
Like that's definitely his forte.
For sure.
I would
for sure.
argue. I guess his last couple haven't been that. Well, I didn't see Bardo. For all I know, no one saw Bardo.
That was weird,
I
man.
do want to see it. The trailer
That
looked
was
beautiful.
weird.
It did not get well received, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's like some of those later Terrence Malick ones where like, fuck, I'd watch this if it wasn't 3 hours long.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like
he's
I think I
trying
could
things.
stand 2 hours of it. Any Chilean films you want to drop on us?
Oh, hell yeah.
Because I've really only I saw No, and I've seen a couple older ones. Yeah.
There's a film called La Fiebre del Loco. See, I gotta look what things are translated as,
Sure.
But
Because it's not just going to be a direct translation of.
no, exactly.
Yeah.
We're gonna go looking for some. Damn, it came out in Spanish. What do you call it, y'all? Soccer Stories. That's a bad title, but that's what it's called. It's 4 different stories, all centered around people watching soccer, but it goes to the north of Chile, so it's deserted, center, Santiago, and then one in the south. So it's also like a film with multiple stories, and it's hilarious. And it has all these different layers to it, all surrounding people trying to watch the World Cup, I think. Araña is a really good film, which is about a ex-right-wing radical who like kind of gets back into action. So it has his political threads. And then Wonderful Woman, Beautiful Woman, Wonderful Woman, Una Mujer Increíble. That was making its rounds in festivals a lot. That was pretty popular recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chilean films, like I like the old school ones, and I don't know where you would be able to find it.
Fair. We'll get them on our streaming service. Don't worry.
Thank you. Please get them out there.
Also, the short that I was talking about earlier, which is like the post-amnesty final duel movie, El Ojo en la Nuca, 2001. So like before, I think that's even before Y Tu Mama. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know anything about that movie. I'm dumb.
You should watch Machuca. That's another Chilean film
Okay,
that should be available.
great.
Machuca.
I'll throw out it's the obvious comparison. I've got a lot of love for Slumdog, which is another, not less of a that does quite a bit of mosaicing. But it is very much sense of place, tonal whiplash. I personally wish the movie took a little bit more Bollywood influence, but especially in 2000, I know Gavin's disagreeing.
Disagree, yeah.
Honestly, the fact that it only has like its only song and dance number in the credits feels a little false to me. It feels a little try hard. Like I would either not have that or I would have something in the actual movie, even if it's a little diegetic or something, because everyone in that movie has such a love of Bollywood, and I don't know. And I don't know. I love international crime mosaic film, and I'm blanking a little bit on more of them. But check out those. From Brazil, Elite Squad and Elite Squad 2. Elite Squad 2 is really good. It's kind of like The Godfather if you're following cops.
Yeah, I've not seen those, but I remember walking into an auditorium early for a class because I just like sometimes I'd check part of a film out during film school, and I walked in during that, and I was blown away by the visualness of it. Like it's such a beautiful, stunning looking movie, and I think it was the second one, but I haven't seen it yet.
The second one's much better. Yeah. And you don't need to watch the first one to really jump into it. But those also have historical significance for like launching the careers of Jose Padillo, who's like a prolific director and producer, and of course Wagner Moura, who gained weight to do Pablo Escobar and is now just like a middle-aged sexy man in movies, and like a very Pedro Pascal.
Man, he's
Chilean.
He's so good in things. I will shout out This Is England, which I may have shouted out before, which is okay. Sorry, it's a movie that I keep
don't
meaning
apologize
to
for
rewatch.
liking This Is England.
And England? It's just called England?
This Is England.
This is England.
Yeah.
And it's about
Thank you for the clarification.
It's about a young skinhead, or a young kid kind of with a skinhead, not quite father figure, but like older kid that he's hanging out with, and slowly getting kind of indoctrinated into being a skinhead. But like good. In the 90s, I believe, or might have been earlier, but that was like a very stunning movie that also is like life's really hard. We're showing a picture of like a pretty tough time in England's history, and a class that is struggling, and how much worse it can get. Like it's just a really fascinating look at that. And man, I had another one on the tip of my tongue that I apparently hadn't recommended before, but it's losing it. So I'll leave it
of course, if you want to see people in a city getting their way out of crime, I've got a Step Up movie that might be. Sometimes it's dancing that gets you out of all of this. I'm so sorry.
Hell yeah.
That was our last episode that we recorded, Yvan.
How about La Haine? Have you guys seen La Haine?
Yeah, I just watched it for the first time actually not too long ago.
Wow. So that's one I recommend all the time. Since we were doing things we recommend all the time.
Yeah, now that we're just playing the hits and naming things, thanks so much for coming, Yvan. I'd love to give you the opportunity. I want to have you back for Amores Perros, obviously. We'll set that up later, and probably dig a little bit deeper. Those episodes end up being a little bit more interview and life based. Do you have anything currently to plug?
I mean, I'm stuck in writer mode, so no, but I've also produced a podcast recently that we started doing called Friday Night Semites on Spotify and YouTube. You can watch it. It's a vlog. No, what's a vodcast?
So it's a video component.
Exactly. Which is, I worked hard on that set. So if you guys can just go look at the set and say, "Oh, that's pretty," then you don't have to listen to anything else. I'll feel great. But yeah, Friday Night Semites.
Interesting pitch for a podcast.
Well, you see where I stand. But yeah, no, it's dope. A lot of it's a Jew and a Palestinian talking about the world. I think from a much more human and collaborative
like
point of view
Chromeo
that you've been hearing lately.
Yeah, Oh, Chromio.
Should get them to do a theme song for you. That'd be pretty great. I think I actually have something to plug for once. Haven't been too active making movies either, but I just finished the rough draft of my travel guide / memoir, and I'm trying to figure out, formatting and everything else. So it's a long way from being available in any capacity. But if any listeners are interested in helping me edit for content or format anyone with book backgrounds, I'm almost ready to start just sending that out to people. If I do end up charging, it's never going to cost much. This is not supposed to be a profitable endeavor, but I would like to actually make physical copies of books, and that is not something that's free.
Oh, nice. I've been trying to write a novel lately. So
it's hard.
It's not easy.
This is a project that I started in the pandemic. That and this podcast kind of helped keep me sane through that. And it's been 4 years that I've just now finishing the first draft.
Good job.
And obviously things get added as I keep going to different locations, and it'll always be a living document. But I feel like a year in, I had 80% of it done, and 3 years later, I now have 98% of it done. I've got 3 more articles to write, but I don't know. I was busy one of those years, so wasn't the other 2. So, but it's hard to finish writing. Gavin, what life achievement do you have to share with us?
I'll shout out real quick. If you happen to be a film festival programmer, be on the lookout for Out for Delivery. Give us some favorable programming if you can, and if you're not a programmer, go watch it at a film festival. Out for Delivery, director Chelsea Christer.
Well, we continue to be Still Good Pod. You can go back through whatever you're looking at here and listen to our older episodes. We're trying to do more of these kind of contemporary ones that tie in with something else as, once again, a plea for relevance, while we structure a season 3 that'll be coming out next year. You can find us at Still Good Pod at Instagram. Please send some feedback to stillgoodpod@gmail.com. We still continue to have no idea what you think about the show and what's working for you, and we would desperately like to. And finally, a Terremoto is a Chilean cocktail that is made with a combination of a regional wine and a pineapple ice cream. And Terremoto, as a lot of you clocked, means earthquake, and it is a very dangerous drink that doesn't seem like it would be that bad because it's just
delicious.
Wine and grenadine based. But the idea is that when you stand up, you stumble and you fall. And
Yes.
you can get a chaser of it as well if you don't want a full second one. And Yvonne, what is that called?
I don't remember.
Oh, it's an aftershock.
I had a terremoto. Aftershock.
Yeah.
Good.
If you just want
But if you want the full
A
experience,
Tremors 2, if you will. Sorry.
you have to go. If you want the full experience, you have to go to this place called El Hoyo, which literally means the hole, and drink it there. And good luck.
Would also argue a very scenic place to set this movie, Valparaiso.
Yes.
They've got the hills, they've got, favelas, and then they can go out to Viña del Mar and go, sandboarding.
That's the Copacabana. That's our Copacabana.
That's their Copacabana, yeah. Yeah. Oh, what a lovely city. Yvonne, thanks so much. We'll have you back, and it's been such a treat to just hang out with you and talk stories.
Likewise. Thank you. Good times.
All right, bye.
Preciso andar, vou por aí a procurar, sorrir pra não chorar. Deixe-me, preciso andar, vou por aí a procurar, sorrir pra não chorar. Quero assistir ao sol nascer, ver as águas dos rios correr, ouvir os pássaros cantar. Eu quero nascer, quero viver, deixe-me, preciso andar. Vou por aí a procurar, vida não chorar. Se alguém por mim perguntar, diga que eu só vou voltar depois que me encontrar. Quero assistir ao sol nascer, ver as águas dos rios correr, ouvir os pássaros cantar. Eu quero nascer, quero viver, deixe-me, preciso andar. Vou por aí a procurar, sorrir pra não chorar.
Deixe-me, preciso andar. Vou por aí a procurar, sorrir pra não chorar.
Deixe-me, preciso andar. Vou por aí a procurar, sorrir pra não chorar.